My name is Tracy, 36 years old, and I was standing in my parents' bathroom, hearing familiar laughter through the wall that made my blood run cold. It was my husband Mark's deep chuckle mixed with my sister Ashley's giggle coming from her old bedroom next door. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone not from shock, but from determination. In that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. One phone call to my brother-in-law Paul would change everything. Before I share what happened at this family party that destroyed 2 marriages, I want to know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how one phone call turned their secret game into a public downfall they never saw coming. The October afternoon was perfect for my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party at their suburban Michigan home. The 2-story colonial house where Ashley and I had grown up was decorated with gold and white balloons. Photos from my parents' 4 decades together displayed on every surface. About 50 family members and friends had gathered to celebrate Richard and Dorothy's milestone, filling the house with warmth and laughter that would soon turn to shock and disbelief. Mark and I had been married for 12 years, what everyone considered the perfect couple. He was 38, tall, with salt and pepper hair that made him look distinguished, working as a financial advisor at a prominent firm downtown. We had 2 beautiful children, Emma, who was 10, and already showing signs of my stubborn streak, and Noah, 8 years old, with his father's charming smile. From the outside, we were living the American dream in our 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, complete with the white picket fence I had always wanted. Ashley, my younger sister at 33, had always been the golden child in our family. 3 years younger than me, but somehow always one step ahead in my parents' eyes. She was married to Paul, 35, a kind-hearted mechanical engineer who adored her completely. Their daughter Lily, 6 years old, was the spitting image of Ashley, with blonde curls and bright blue eyes that could melt anyone's heart. They lived 20 minutes away in a newer development, close enough for frequent family gatherings, that had recently taken on a different meaning I was only beginning to understand. For the past 6 months, something had been off in my marriage. Mark had started working late, more frequently missing family dinners, with explanations about urgent client meetings and market volatility that required his immediate attention. His phone, which used to lie carelessly around the house, was now always face down and never left unattended. When it buzzed with notifications, he would glance at it quickly and dismiss them as work emails, but the small smile that played at his lips told a different story. Ashley had also changed her patterns in those same 6 months. She started dropping by our house more often, always when Mark happened to be home sick or working from home. Her excuse was always reasonable: borrowing something for Lily's school project or dropping off Mom's famous casserole recipe she had suddenly remembered I wanted. These visits that used to last 15 minutes now stretched to an hour or more, filled with inside jokes I did not understand and glances they thought I did not catch. The family party preparation had started early that morning. I had arrived at my parents' house at 9 to help Mom with the food preparation, bringing my famous spinach artichoke dip and 3 dozen cupcakes Emma and I had decorated the night before. The kitchen smelled like pot roast and fresh-baked rolls, Mom's signature party menu that brought back memories of every major celebration from our childhood. Mark had promised to arrive by noon with the kids after Emma's soccer practice. He walked in at 12:30, apologizing profusely about traffic, though Emma later mentioned they had actually stopped for ice cream after practice ended early. Ashley and Paul arrived separately, which was unusual. Ashley came first, with Lily claiming Paul was finishing up a work project and would be there within the hour. She looked particularly stunning in a navy blue dress that seemed too formal for a family gathering, her hair professionally styled, unlike her usual casual waves. The house filled quickly with relatives from both sides of my parents' family. Uncle Tom, Dad's brother and a Vietnam veteran, held court in the living room with his war stories. Aunt Marie, Mom's sister, bustled around the kitchen, criticizing the seasoning on everything while simultaneously praising Mom's hosting skills. Cousins I had not seen since last Christmas arrived with their children, and soon the house was alive with multiple generations celebrating together. I noticed Mark and Ashley's first disappearance about 30 minutes into the party. I had been refilling the vegetable tray when I realized Mark was not in his usual spot by the television, with the other husbands watching the Michigan game. Ashley was also notably absent from the kitchen, where she typically helped Mom orchestrate the food service. My cousin Sarah, a divorce lawyer from Chicago, actually commented on it, joking that they were probably hiding from the chaos together. The comment hit differently than Sarah intended. I made an excuse about needing to find Mark to ask about the car keys, though they were safely in my purse. Mom, distracted by Grandma's arrival, mentioned she had asked Ashley to get the old photo albums from her childhood bedroom upstairs. She wanted to create a display showing how the family had grown over 40 years. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable explanation for Ashley's absence. Paul was engaged in an animated discussion about the Detroit Lions' chances this season with my uncle's beer in hand and completely oblivious to his wife's whereabouts. He caught my eye and smiled that genuine warm smile that made me feel guilty for what I was beginning to suspect. Lily was in the backyard with Emma and the other children, their laughter floating through the open windows like a soundtrack to a life about to shatter. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding with each step. The hallway was exactly as it had been during our childhood family photos, lining the walls in chronological order. There was Ashley and me in matching Easter dresses, gap-toothed grins, and innocence that seemed foreign now. Our high school graduations, college achievements, wedding photos, all documenting a relationship between sisters that was about to be irreversibly destroyed. As I approached Ashley's old bedroom at the end of the hall, I heard them. Mark's distinctive laugh. The one that used to make my heart flutter when we were dating now made my stomach turn. Ashley's giggle followed, intimate and familiar, in a way that confirmed every suspicion I had been pushing down for months. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for voices to carry, but not enough to see inside without deliberately looking. I stood frozen in that hallway, my hand on my phone, knowing that the next few moments would determine not just the fate of my marriage, but the entire structure of our family. Downstairs, I could hear Dad starting to tap his glass, preparing for his anniversary speech about love, loyalty, and the importance of family. The irony was not lost on me as I prepared to document the ultimate betrayal happening just feet away from where our parents were celebrating 4 decades of faithfulness. Moving closer to the door, I positioned myself where I could see through the narrow opening without being detected. What I saw confirmed everything my intuition had been screaming for months. Mark was sitting on Ashley's childhood bed, the pink comforter still the same from high school, and Ashley was beside him, her hand on his thigh in a gesture far too intimate for in-laws. Their bodies were turned toward each other, creating their own private world in this room full of teenage memories and stuffed animals that watched like silent witnesses to their betrayal. I pulled out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady as I switched to video mode. The lawyer and Sarah's voice echoed in my head from a conversation months ago about always documenting everything. Through the screen, I watched my husband lean in to whisper something in my sister's ear that made her throw her head back in delight. The afternoon sun streaming through the lace curtains illuminated them like some twisted romantic movie scene, except this was my reality, my marriage, my family being destroyed in real time. Their conversation became clearer as I focused on recording. Ashley was saying something about Paul never suspecting anything, her voice carrying a note of superiority that made my skin crawl. She mentioned how oblivious he was, how he actually thought her increased visits to our house were about strengthening family bonds. The cruelty in her laughter when she said this made me realize I had never really known my sister at all. Mark responded by pulling her closer, his wedding ring catching the light as his hand moved to her waist. The ring I had placed on his finger 12 years ago while promising to love and honor him, now being used to embrace my sister. He told her that I was equally clueless, too wrapped up in my marketing job and the kids' schedules to notice the obvious signs. He actually used the word convenient to describe how my trust in both of them had made their deception so easy. The next words out of Ashley's mouth nearly made me drop my phone. She mentioned that 8 months was long enough to keep sneaking around, that after our parents' anniversary celebration died down, they should start making real plans. She wanted to file for divorce from Paul after the holidays, claiming it would be less traumatic for Lily that way. The casual cruelty of planning to destroy a child's family while sitting in a childhood bedroom surrounded by innocence was breathtaking. Mark agreed enthusiastically, outlining his own timeline for leaving me. He had already been moving money into a separate account, he admitted, small amounts that I would not notice. He figured by spring he would have enough set aside to get his own apartment while the divorce was being finalized. They could be together openly by next summer. He promised, kissing her forehead with a tenderness he had not shown me in over a year. I recorded for 30 more seconds, capturing Ashley saying she loved him and Mark responding in kind. The video was clear, their faces visible, their words audible. It was everything I would need, and more than any wife or sister should ever have to witness. I carefully backed away from the door, my feet silent on the carpet our mother had installed to muffle the sounds of teenage sneaking out, now muffling my discovery of adult betrayal. Making my way to the downstairs bathroom, I locked the door and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had just witnessed. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I expected to see tears. Devastation, the broken woman who had just watched her husband declare love for her sister. Instead, I saw something else entirely. Determination. Fury carefully controlled. A woman who had just been handed the power to destroy the two people who had destroyed her, and the clarity to know exactly how to use it. I thought about the 12 years of marriage that had led to this moment. The fertility struggles Mark had seemed so supportive through, now wondering if he had been relieved when it took us 3 years to conceive Emma. The postpartum depression after Noah that Ashley had helped me through, staying at our house for weeks, and now I wondered when exactly her help had transformed into something else. The family vacations where Mark and Ashley always seemed to end up on the same team for beach volleyball or board games, their competitiveness now revealed as foreplay. My phone buzzed with the text from Paul asking if I had seen Ashley, as he wanted to get a family photo before Dad's speech. Sweet, trusting Paul, who had no idea his wife was upstairs planning their divorce while wrapped in my husband's arms. I texted back that I needed to speak with him urgently in the garage, keeping my message vague enough not to alarm him, but serious enough that he would come immediately. Opening my contacts, I found Paul's number and called him directly, keeping my phone on silent mode to avoid drawing attention. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful as he asked what was going on. I told him simply that I needed him in the garage immediately, that it was about Ashley, and it could not wait. The cheer left his voice, instantly replaced with concern as he agreed to meet me there. I waited 3 minutes to ensure Paul had time to extract himself from the football conversation, then slipped out the side door to the garage. The space smelled of motor oil and lawn equipment, a masculine refuge where my father had taught me to change oil and check tire pressure, skills he insisted both his daughters needed. Now I stood in that same space, preparing to deliver news that would shatter another man's world. Paul entered through the side door, his face already showing worry lines. He was a good man, the kind who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders, and coached Little League despite having no athletic ability himself. He deserved better than what I was about to show him, but he deserved the truth more than comfortable ignorance. Without speaking, I handed him my phone with the video already queued up. I watched his face transform as he processed what he was seeing. The confusion came first, his brain trying to rationalize why his wife was in a bedroom with his brother-in-law. Then came the shock as their intimacy became undeniable. The rage followed his fists clenching so tight, his knuckles went white. Finally, devastation settled over his features as Ashley's words about divorce played through the small speaker. His legs gave out, and he sank onto an overturned bucket, my phone falling from his limp fingers. I caught it before it hit the concrete, then placed my hand on his shoulder. We stood there in that garage, two betrayed spouses among the lawnmowers and Christmas decorations, processing the destruction of our marriages, while 40 feet away, our families celebrated eternal love. Paul's first words were about Lily wondering how Ashley could do this to their daughter. Then came the questions about how long I had known, why I had not confronted them immediately what we were going to do. His pain was raw and immediate, while mine had been building for months into something harder and more calculated. I told him I had only just confirmed it, but I had suspected for weeks. I also told him I had a plan if he was willing to follow my lead. The plan formed as I spoke, it driven by a cold fury that surprised me with its clarity. We would not confront them privately, allowing them to deny or minimize or beg for forgiveness in secret. We would not slink away quietly filing for divorce with our heads down while they controlled the narrative. Instead, we would expose them in front of everyone they cared about at the very celebration of marriage and family they were defiling with their presence. Paul's initial instinct was to storm inside immediately and confront Mark physically. His engineer's brain calculated the satisfaction of his fist connecting with Mark's jaw, the release of violence against the man who had taken his wife. I talked him down, explaining that assault charges would only complicate the divorces and potentially impact custody arrangements. There was a better way, I promised, one that would hurt them more than any physical blow. We spent the next 10 minutes strategizing our shared betrayal, creating an unexpected alliance. Paul would return to the party first, acting normally while I waited a few more minutes in the garage. We would let Mark and Ashley return to the party, let them think their secret was still safe. Then, during the traditional family toast portion of the anniversary party, we would reveal everything. The video would be our weapon, the family our witnesses, and the consequences would be theirs to bear. 20 minutes had passed since I had captured the video that would end 2 marriages and divide a family. I returned to the party through the kitchen door, my expression carefully neutral as I helped Mom arrange dessert plates. She commented that I looked pale, asking if I was feeling all right. I assured her I was fine, just a little warm from all the activity. If only she knew how dramatically her anniversary party was about to shift from celebration to chaos. Mark and Ashley had returned to the main floor, seamlessly inserting themselves back into different conversations as if they had not just been planning their future together upstairs. Mark was back with the men, watching football, beer in hand, and commenting on a questionable referee call. Ashley stood with our cousin Jennifer, admiring her new engagement ring and offering wedding planning advice with the authority of someone whose own marriage was not built on deception. The normalcy of it all was surreal. Mark caught my eye across the room and smiled the same smile that used to make me feel loved and now made me feel sick. He mouthed, "Love you," with such practiced ease that I wondered how many times he had done the same after being with Ashley. I forced myself to smile back, playing the role of devoted wife for just a little while longer. Ashley approached me in the kitchen, her arms sliding around my shoulders in sisterly affection that felt like poison seeping through my clothes. She thanked me for helping Mom with everything, said the party was beautiful, and mentioned how lucky we were to have parents with such a strong marriage. The hypocrisy was stunning, but I managed to pat her hand and agree that marriage was indeed a precious commitment that should be honored. Paul was doing his part brilliantly, standing with Ashley as she returned to his side, his arm around her waist in what appeared to be affection, but I recognized as possession. He was marking his territory before the revelation, making sure everyone saw them as a couple one last time. Lily ran up to them, her face painted with butterflies from the kids' craft table, and Paul lifted her onto his shoulders with a father's love that made my heart ache for what was about to happen to this innocent child. Dad climbed onto a chair in the living room, tapping his beer bottle with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The room gradually quieted, people finding seats or comfortable standing positions for what everyone assumed would be the typical anniversary speech. Mom stood beside him, her face glowing with the satisfaction of 40 years well lived. They had no idea their legacy of faithful marriage was about to be contrasted with the ultimate betrayal. Dad's speech began with the story of how he met Mom at a church dance in 1983, a tale we had all heard countless times but never tired of. He spoke about building a life together, about trust being the foundation of any lasting relationship, about how family was everything. Each word felt like it was specifically chosen to highlight what Mark and Ashley had violated, though Dad had no idea how relevant his words were about to become. He talked about watching his daughters grow up and find love, how proud he was to have sons-in-law he considered his own boys. Mark actually raised his beer in acknowledgement his ability to perform normalcy while harboring such deception, showing a sociopathy I had never recognized before. Paul's hand tightened on his own bottle, the only sign of the fury bubbling beneath his controlled exterior. As Dad wound down his speech, talking about hoping for 40 more years with Mom, I saw my moment approaching. The tradition was for family members to offer their own toasts after Dad's main speech. Usually it went in age order, which would mean Uncle Tom would go first with his slightly inappropriate but well-meaning Marine Corps humor. But tonight would be different. I stood up before Uncle Tom could begin, my wineglass in hand, drawing everyone's attention. Dad looked surprised, but pleased that I wanted to speak, gesturing for me to continue. The room fell silent, all eyes on me as I moved to stand beside my parents. Mark's expression showed confusion, but not yet concern, probably thinking I was about to give some touching daughter's tribute to marital longevity. My voice was steady as I began thanking my parents for showing us what real love looked like. I talked about how their example had shaped my understanding of commitment, loyalty, and trust. Mom was tearing up already, reaching out to squeeze my hand in maternal affection. I squeezed back, drawing strength from her touch for what was about to come. Then I shifted the topic slightly, mentioning how trust once broken could never be fully repaired. How betrayal, especially from those closest to us, cut deeper than any stranger's wound. The room's energy began to shift, people sensing this was not the typical anniversary toast. Mark's face had gone from confused to alert, his eyes finding Ashley across the room in a moment of shared panic. I continued, my voice growing stronger, saying that while we were here celebrating 40 years of faithfulness, not everyone in this room understood what that meant. That some people took vows they never intended to keep, made promises, while already planning their betrayal. Dad tried to intervene, confused by the direction of my speech, but I raised my hand to indicate I was not finished. Looking directly at Mark, I asked if he had anything he wanted to share with the family. His face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool October air. He shook his head mutely, his voice seemingly trapped in his throat. I turned to Ashley, then asking the same question. She stood frozen, her hand gripping Paul's arm so tight, her knuckles were white, though whether for support or restraint I could not tell. When neither responded, I announced that I had something to share on their behalf. I pulled out my phone, already connected to my parents' smart TV, through years of showing kid videos at family gatherings. Before anyone could process what was happening, I hit play on the video that would change everything. The large screen television came to life with the image of Mark and Ashley in her childhood bedroom, their voices crystal clear through the surround sound system Dad had installed last Christmas. The room erupted in chaos before the video even finished. Mom's gasp was audible over everything else, her hand flying to her mouth as she watched her younger daughter declare love for her older daughter's husband. Dad had to grab the wall for support, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Grandma, 85 years old and sharp as ever, loudly declared this was the most shameful thing she had witnessed in her entire life. Uncle Tom, the Marine, who had seen combat, looked more shocked than he probably had in war zones. Aunt Marie was frantically trying to usher children out of the room, though most were too young to understand what was happening. Cousins were pulling out phones, some to record the unfolding drama, others to call family members who had not attended. The perfect anniversary party had become a tabloid-worthy scandal in less than 60 seconds. Mark attempted damage control, stepping forward with his hands raised, claiming it was not what it looked like. The cliché of his defense might have been laughable if the situation was not so tragic. Ashley had started crying, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her face in black rivers. She reached for Paul, perhaps seeking comfort from the very man she had been planning to abandon, but he stepped away from her touch like it was contaminated. Paul's moment had arrived, and he took the floor with a composure that belied the rage I knew was coursing through him. His voice cut through the chaos, silencing the room with its deadly calm. He looked at Ashley, his wife of 8 years, the mother of his child, and the love drained from his eyes like water from a broken glass. 8 months, Ashley. You have been doing this for 8 months. His voice cracked on the last words, the engineer's precision failing him as emotion broke through. Every time you said you were visiting Tracy to help with the kids, you were with him. Every time you claimed to have a girls' night, you were with him. When you missed Lily's dance recital because of a migraine, were you with him then too? Ashley's sobs intensified, but she managed to shake her head at the last accusation, as if that one small truth could somehow redeem the 8 months of lies. Paul laughed bitterly at her denial, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. He began listing every suspicious moment he had dismissed, every red flag he had ignored, because he trusted his wife completely. Remember when you came home with your shirt inside out last month? You said you had changed at the gym. There was no gym bag in your car, Ashley. I checked later, feeling crazy for doubting you. But I was not crazy, was I? I was just too trusting, too stupid to see what my own wife was doing with my brother-in-law. The family's reactions varied wildly around the room. Mom had collapsed into a chair, Dad standing behind her with his hands on her shoulders, both looking like they had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Their 40th anniversary celebration had become the backdrop for their daughter's mutual destruction. The irony was not lost on anyone, especially not on the elderly relatives who kept muttering about shame and disappointment. Aunt Marie, usually the family gossip, stood speechless for possibly the first time in her 63 years. Uncle Tom had moved to stand near me, a protective presence that I had not expected but deeply appreciated. He had always been fond of me since I was the only niece who would listen to his war stories without checking my phone. Now he stood like a sentinel, ready to intervene if Mark attempted to approach me. Cousin Sarah, the divorce lawyer, was already in professional mode despite the personal nature of the crisis. She had her phone out, typing notes, occasionally pulling me aside to whisper about documentation and next steps. Her presence was a reminder that this revelation was not the end, but the beginning of a long, painful legal process that would formally dissolve what had already been destroyed. The younger cousins were huddled in corners, some crying from the tension, even if they did not fully understand the situation. Others were wide-eyed with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for reality TV, except this was their actual family imploding in real time. Phones were out everywhere, and I knew this story would spread through extended family and social media before the night was over. Mark tried once more to salvage something from the wreckage, turning to me with desperation in his eyes. "Tracy, please, we need to talk about this privately. This is between us, not the whole family. Can we just go home and discuss this like adults?" I actually laughed at his audacity. The sound was sharp and bitter, nothing like my usual laugh that he used to say was one of the things he fell in love with. Like adults. Adults do not sleep with their spouse's sister. Adults do not plan divorces in childhood bedrooms while their children play outside. Adults honor their commitments or have the courage to end them honestly. Ashley found her voice finally and predictably. She tried to paint herself and Mark as victims of circumstance. "You do not understand," she said to the room at large, though her eyes were on our parents. "We did not mean for this to happen. We fought it for so long, but love does not follow rules. Sometimes you meet your soulmate at the wrong time in the wrong circumstances." Soulmate Paul's voice was incredulous. "Your soulmate. We have a daughter, Ashley. We built a life together. We stood in front of our families, in front of God, and promised to forsake all others. And you call my brother-in-law your soulmate." Mom finally spoke, her voice shaking with a combination of grief and fury I had never heard from her before. She stood up slowly, Dad's hand still on her shoulder, and faced Ashley with the kind of disappointment that cut deeper than any anger could. "How could you do this to your sister, your own blood? Tracy held you when you cried over boys in high school. She was your maid of honor. She named you Emma's godmother. How could you?" Ashley's defenses crumbled under Mom's disappointment. She tried to explain, words tumbling out about feeling unfulfilled, about Paul not understanding her creative soul, about the connection she had with Mark being deeper than anything she had experienced. Each excuse sounded more hollow than the last, especially when contrasted with the reality of the betrayal she had committed. Mark jumped on Ashley's narrative, adding his own complaints about our marriage. Tracy was always focused on her career, never had time for us anymore. She was cold, calculating, more interested in her marketing presentations than our relationship. We were like roommates, not spouses. Ashley understood me in ways Tracy never tried to. The lies were stunning in their revisionism. I had begged Mark for months to go to couples therapy to work on our growing distance. He had refused, saying we were fine, that all marriages went through rough patches. I had planned date nights he canceled for work. I had tried to initiate intimacy. He rejected, claiming exhaustion. Now he was rewriting history to justify his betrayal. I pulled out my phone again this time, showing text messages from the past 6 months. Messages where I suggested counseling, where I expressed concern about our marriage, where I tried to reconnect with my husband. Each one was met with dismissal or empty promises from Mark. The evidence was overwhelming, and the room could see it. Dad, who had been silent since the revelation, finally spoke. His voice carried the authority of a patriarch whose family was fracturing before his eyes. Mark Ashley, you need to leave. Now. This is still my house, and you are no longer welcome here. You have disrespected everything this family stands for, everything this anniversary represents. Get out. Ashley looked shocked that Dad, who had always had a soft spot for his baby girl, was throwing her out. She appealed to him with tear-filled eyes, but he stood firm. The man who had walked her down the aisle 8 years ago could not look at her now. The betrayal was not just against me and Paul, but against the entire family structure, the trust that bound us all together. Mark tried one more time, addressing the room with a salesman's instinct for persuasion. This is all being blown out of proportion. Yes, we made a mistake, but we are all family here. Families forgive. Families work through problems together. You cannot just throw us out. Grandma, who had been sitting quietly processing everything with her decades of wisdom, stood up with surprising agility. She walked over to Mark, all 5 feet of her radiating disgust, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You are not family. Family does not do this. My granddaughter deserves better than a man who would betray her with her own sister. And you," she turned to Ashley, "are a disgrace to the family name." The room fell silent after Grandma's pronouncement, her words carrying the weight of generational authority. Mark and Ashley stood frozen, perhaps finally understanding that there would be no forgiveness here, no smoothing over this betrayal with apologies and promises. The family they had counted on for support had become their judges, and the verdict was unanimous. Emma suddenly appeared in the doorway, her 10-year-old face confused and frightened by the tension she could feel but not understand. She looked around the room, taking in her grandmother's tears, her grandfather's stern face, and the way everyone seemed to be standing in opposite corners like boxers in a ring. Her eyes found mine, and she asked the question I had been dreading. "Mom, why is everyone upset? Where is Daddy going? Why is Aunt Ashley crying?" The room collectively held its breath as I walked over to my daughter, kneeling down to her level. I took her small hands in mine, looking into eyes that were the same green as Mark's, and told her a version of the truth she could process. "Daddy and Mommy are having some grown-up problems, sweetheart. We are going to be staying at Grandma and Grandpa's tonight. Daddy needs to go somewhere else for a while." Mark moved toward Emma, perhaps thinking he could use our daughter as a shield or bargaining chip, but Uncle Tom stepped between them. The Marine's message was clear without words. Mark would not be manipulating any more family members tonight. Emma looked at her father with confusion, not understanding why Uncle Tom was blocking him, why everyone looked so angry. Noah appeared next, drawn by his sister's voice. At 8, he was even less equipped to understand what was happening. He ran to me, wrapping his arms around my neck with the innocent trust that his world was still safe as long as Mom was there. I held both my children, feeling the weight of how their lives were about to change, how the stable family they had known was now broken beyond repair. Paul had found Lily in the chaos, his daughter clinging to him as she sensed the adult upset, without comprehending its source. The 3 children cousins who had played together since birth now stood with their parents, divided by an invisible line that would forever change their relationships. Birthday parties, holidays, family gatherings, all would be different now, tainted by this moment. Ashley made one desperate attempt to reach out to her daughter, but Paul pulled Lily closer, his body language making it clear that Ashley had lost the right to comfort their child. She had chosen Mark over her family, and now she would face the consequences of that choice. Lily buried her face in Paul's shoulder, overwhelmed by the emotions swirling around her. The exit that followed was pathetic in its mundanity. Mark grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, his movements mechanical. Ashley looked around for her purse, her hands shaking as she picked it up from beside the couch where she had left it when everything was still normal. They moved toward the door like condemned prisoners walking to their fate, each step taking them further from the family they had betrayed. Mark turned back one last time, his eyes finding mine across the room. "I want to see my kids," he said, as if access to Emma and Noah was still his, right after what he had done. "You will see them when the court decides you can see them," Sarah interjected, her lawyer voice cutting through any sentimentality. "And I suggest you get yourself a good attorney, because Tracy is going to need documentation of your fitness as a parent, especially given the judgment you have shown here." Ashley looked at Mom one more time, seeking any crack in the wall of disappointment. Mom turned away, unable to look at the daughter who had betrayed her sister so completely. That turning away seemed to break something in Ashley, and she fled the house with a sob that echoed through the rooms we had all shared so many memories in. The door closed behind them with a finality that reverberated through the house. The anniversary party was over, the celebration turned into a wake for 2 marriages and a family's innocence. The relatives began to slowly disperse, some offering condolences, as if there had been a death, which in a way there had been. The death of trust, of assumption, of the belief that family meant safety. Aunt Marie finally found her voice, beginning to process the gossip potential of what she had witnessed. Uncle Tom shut her down with a look that could have stopped a charging battalion. This was not entertainment. This was not fodder for phone calls and coffee shop whispers. This was 2 families destroyed, 3 children's lives upended, and a betrayal that would echo through generations. The children were taken to the den to watch a movie, the adults needing to discuss practical matters without small ears listening. Paul and I found ourselves standing together in the kitchen, 2 casualties of the same war, trying to figure out our next moves. He would take Lily to his mother's house tonight. She lived an hour away, far enough from Ashley to give him space to think and plan. I would keep Emma and Noah here at my parents' house. Mom had already started making up the guest room, her practical response to crisis taking over. Dad was on the phone with a locksmith, arranging to change the locks on my house first thing in the morning. The family was circling the wagons, protecting Paul and me from further harm, while Mark and Ashley faced exile. Cousin Sarah laid out the legal roadmap with clinical precision. File for divorce immediately. Monday morning if possible. Document everything, including the video, the text messages, and any financial irregularities. Separate bank accounts immediately. Cancel joint credit cards. Change passwords on everything. The list was overwhelming, but necessary, each item a step toward reclaiming our lives from the people who had stolen them. As the house slowly emptied of guests, the weight of what had happened began to settle. The anniversary cake sat untouched on the dining room table, 40 candles never to be lit, the celebration derailed by the very betrayal it was meant to stand against. Mom packed up the food mechanically, her movements automatic after decades of hosting, though her heart was clearly broken. Dad pulled me aside as I helped clean up, his eyes red with unshed tears. He apologized for Ashley as if her betrayal was somehow his fault as her father. I told him it was not his responsibility, that Ashley was a grown woman who had made her own choices. But I could see the guilt eating at him, wondering if he had failed as a parent, if he had missed some sign that could have prevented this. The text messages started almost immediately. Mark sending variations of, "Please let me explain, and we need to talk and think of the children." I blocked his number without responding. Ashley texted Paul begging for forgiveness, swearing it meant nothing, that she had made a terrible mistake. He showed me the messages before blocking her as well. Their desperation was pathetic, but it was also too late. As night fell on what was supposed to be a day of celebration, I tucked my children into the guest bed at my parents' house. Emma asked if Daddy would be at breakfast tomorrow, and I told her no, he would not. Noah wanted to know if we were getting divorced like his friend Tommy's parents. I told them we would talk about everything tomorrow, that tonight they just needed to sleep, and know they were loved. After the children were asleep, I sat on my childhood bed in my old room, surrounded by remnants of a simpler time when Ashley was just my annoying little sister and Mark was the charming man who made me laugh. The stuffed animals on the shelf seemed to mock me with their permanent smiles, unchanged by the betrayal that had unfolded in the room next door. 1 week had passed since the anniversary party that became an exposé. The divorce papers were filed Monday morning as Sarah had advised, both Paul and I sitting in our respective lawyers' offices signing documents that officially began the end of our marriages. The legal language was cold and precise, reducing years of life together to assets and liabilities, custody arrangements, and visitation schedules. Mark had been served at his office a detail I specifically requested. His co-workers watched as he was handed the papers, his professional facade cracking in front of the people he needed to impress. The news spread through his firm quickly, and I heard from mutual acquaintances that his reputation as a trustworthy financial advisor had taken a significant hit. After all, if he could betray his wife with her sister, what else was he capable of? Ashley received her papers at the apartment she had hastily rented after being thrown out of Paul's house. She had tried to return home the day after the party, but Paul had already changed the locks. Her belongings were neatly packed in boxes on the front porch, a civilized ending to an uncivilized betrayal. She texted me photos of the boxes, as if I would feel sympathy for her homelessness, but I deleted them without responding. The children were adjusting as well as could be expected. Emma had taken on a protective role with Noah, her 10-year-old shoulders carrying more weight than they should. She asked direct questions about why Daddy had to leave, and I gave her age-appropriate honesty. Daddy had broken important promises, and sometimes when adults break promises, they cannot live together anymore. Noah's reaction was simpler, but more heartbreaking. He just wanted his daddy back, wanted our family to be normal again. He did not understand why Aunt Ashley did not visit anymore, why Lily was not coming over to play. The interconnected nature of our families made the betrayal even more complex for the children to navigate. Paul and I had developed an unexpected support system for each other. We texted daily, checking in on each other's emotional state and sharing lawyer recommendations. We met for coffee to discuss how to handle the children's questions about why their aunt and uncle were suddenly absent. We were trauma-bonded, two survivors of the same earthquake trying to rebuild on shaky ground. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, the financial reality of Mark's betrayal became clear. The money he had been moving to a separate account was more substantial than his initial admission suggested. Nearly $30,000 had been siphoned from our joint accounts over 8 months, small enough increments to avoid immediate detection, but adding up to a significant sum. My lawyer called it dissipation of marital assets, and it would cost him in the settlement. The house was put on the market, the 4-bedroom colonial that had been our dream home, now just another asset to divide. Every room held memories that were now tainted. The kitchen where Mark had proposed over morning coffee, the nursery we had painted together for Emma, the bedroom where our marriage had slowly died while he was falling in love with my sister. I was relieved when it sold quickly to a young family who would create better memories within its walls. The children started therapy both to process the divorce and the loss of their extended family structure. Emma's therapist reported that she was angry but adjusting her intelligence, helping her understand even as her heart struggled to accept. Noah was having more difficulty, his behavior regressing at school and at home. The therapist assured me this was normal, that children process trauma differently, but watching my baby struggle broke my heart daily. Ashley made numerous attempts to reconcile with the family. She sent flowers to Mom with cards begging for forgiveness. She showed up at Dad's office crying about making a mistake and needing her family back. She even contacted extended relatives trying to gain allies who might advocate for her readmission to the family fold. Each attempt was rebuffed, the family line holding firm against the sister who had committed the ultimate betrayal. Mark was less persistent, but more manipulative in his attempts. He used the children as leverage, telling them during his limited visitation that Mommy was keeping the family apart, that if she would just forgive him, everyone could be happy again. Emma, smart beyond her years, told him that he was the one who broke the family by kissing Aunt Ashley. The fact that she had to defend me to her own father showed how completely he had failed as both husband and parent. 6 months after that fateful October day, the divorces were finalized. Paul got primary custody of Lily, with Ashley having supervised visitation after her emotional instability during the proceedings raised concerns. I got primary custody of Emma and Noah, with Mark having them every other weekend and one evening per week. The financial settlements were fair but costly for the betrayers, their infidelity and financial deception working against them. I had started a new job as marketing director at a startup. The promotion I had been working toward finally achieved, though in circumstances I never imagined. The flexible schedule allowed me to be more present for the children, while the increased salary meant I was not financially dependent on Mark's support. Independence felt like armor against future betrayal. The kids and I moved into a 3-bedroom condo downtown, closer to my new office and their school. It was smaller than our old house, but filled with light and possibility. Emma chose purple for her room, while Noah picked superhero themes for his. We adopted a rescue dog, a golden retriever mix that Noah named Captain, who seemed to understand his job was to help heal our broken family. Paul and I continued our friendship, our shared experience creating a bond that surprised us both. We had dinners together with all 3 kids, creating a new kind of family unit that was not romantic but was deeply supportive. The children benefited from maintaining their cousin relationship even as their parents' siblings were erased from their lives. Mark and Ashley's relationship, the great love that was worth destroying 2 families for, lasted exactly 4 months after the divorces were finalized. The reality of being together without the excitement of secrecy, combined with the social stigma of their betrayal, proved too much. Mark moved to another state for a fresh start with a new firm. Ashley attempted to return to Paul, claiming she had made a terrible mistake, but that door was firmly closed. 1 year after the anniversary party revelation, our family gathered again for Mom and Dad's 41st anniversary. It was smaller, quieter, but somehow more genuine. The loss of Ashley was palpable, her absence a wound that had scarred but not fully healed. But there was also a sense of survival of a family that had weathered the worst betrayal and remained standing. Paul and Lily were there, fully integrated into our reconfigured family. Dad had taken to calling Paul's son the title, meaning more now that it had been tested by crisis. Mom doted on all 3 grandchildren equally. Her love expanded to fill the space Ashley had vacated. The extended family had also adjusted Uncle Tom regularly, taking the kids fishing Aunt Marie, teaching Emma to bake despite her previous criticisms. During dinner, Emma raised her juice glass for a toast, her 11-year-old voice clear and strong. She thanked Grandma and Grandpa for showing everyone what real love looked like, for being married for so long without hurting each other. Then she looked at me and added that she was proud of me for being strong, for protecting her and Noah, for showing her that sometimes the hardest choice was the right choice. There was not a dry eye at the table as we raised our glasses to resilience, to family bonds that transcend blood, to the possibility of happiness after betrayal. The journey from that October afternoon to this moment had been brutal, filled with lawyers and therapy and tears. But we had survived, scarred but stronger, broken but rebuilt. As I tucked the kids into bed that night in my condo, Noah asked if I ever missed Daddy and Aunt Ashley. I told him the truth, that I missed who I thought they were, but not who they actually turned out to be. Emma added that she did not miss the lying, the pretending everything was okay when it was not. Even at their young ages, they understood that authenticity, even painful authenticity, was better than beautiful deception. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Ashley using someone else's phone, begging for just 5 minutes to explain, to apologize, to make things right. I deleted it without responding and blocked that number too. Some bridges once burned were meant to stay ash. Some betrayals were too deep for forgiveness, at least not the kind that welcomed the betrayer back into your life. Looking out my bedroom window at the city lights, I reflected on the journey from that bathroom in my parents' house where I first heard their laughter through the wall. The woman who had stood there recording evidence of betrayal had been operating on pure instinct and adrenaline. The woman I was now had been forged in the fire of that betrayal, transformed from someone who trusted blindly to someone who trusted wisely. The best revenge, they say, is living well, and I was determined to do exactly that. Not for revenge, really, but for my children, for myself, for the example it set, that betrayal did not have to destroy the betrayed. Mark and Ashley had taken my marriage and my sister, but they had not taken my capacity for joy, for love, for building something beautiful from the wreckage they created. Paul texted goodnight as he did every evening, a simple check-in that had become part of our routine. We were considering taking the kids on a joint vacation to Disney World, creating new memories to overlay the painful ones. It was not the family structure any of us had planned, but it was real and honest and free from deception. The last photo on my phone from that anniversary party was one Dad had taken right before his speech. All of us together, Mark's arm around me, Ashley leaning into Paul, the children playing at our feet, everyone smiling at what looked like the perfect family moment. I had kept it not from nostalgia, but as a reminder that pictures lie, that perfection was often performance, that the most dangerous betrayals came from those who smiled while holding the knife. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Co-parenting with a man I could never trust again, helping my children navigate relationships after witnessing such fundamental betrayal, continuing to heal the family wounds Ashley had inflicted. But tonight, I was at peace. My children safe, my future. My own to determine my story, no longer defined by those who had tried to write me as a fool. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild? What would you have done if you discovered your spouse with your own sibling? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival resilience and the complicated dynamics of family betrayal. Share this with anyone who needs to know they are not alone in facing deception from those closest to them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge, but rebuilding your life so beautifully that their absence becomes irrelevant. You deserve loyalty, truth, and love that does not require you to compete with your own family. Never settle for less.